Okay, so welcome back again, module 4, getting to grip with things. So today we are going to look at, risk and protective factors. So this is in relation to drug and alcohol use and, what increases the risk or reduce the risk of our child using alcohol or drugs. But first things first, one word on how you are feeling today. So if it's a positive feeling, what has made your day positive or what has helped you to feel that way? Do you need to do more of it? If maybe it's a negative feeling, if you're feeling stressed or tired or overwhelmed, what do you need to do to support yourself? So again, this is about self-care, minding ourselves as parents, minding ourselves as people. Okay, so this is down to the serious stuff. And why do young people use alcohol or drugs? And there's a whole list of reasons. For fun, for escapism, maybe they're curious or bored, and to feel mature, independent, or to show off, to boost confidence, or to forget problems. So there's a whole host of different reasons that young people will try drugs and will use drugs or alcohol. So true or false? Young people are tempted to try drugs by pushers or dealers. So what do you think? Young people are tempted to try drugs by pushers or dealers. So is it true or false? So it's actually false. Many young people are introduced to illegal drugs by a friend or someone they know. In many cases, drugs are pulled rather than pushed. The person asks for it themselves, often out of curiosity. So often they just want to try something and they'll ask a friend. So accessibility of alcohol and drugs. So where do young people get alcohol or drugs? So on the street, in parties, they can get them in schools, in public houses, at home. Often young people are introduced to alcohol and drugs in the home. From friends, from the off license, they might get an older teenager, someone to buy it for them. So there's a load of places they can get them. And I suppose we live in a society where alcohol and drugs is widely available. I think we kind of have to reach a point where we accept that it is part of our society. There has been several drives to try and stamp it out, and it has always endured. So as parents, we really need to look at, well, how can we support our children and, help our children to be more resilient to the influences of alcohol and drugs. And often as parents, our own attitudes towards alcohol and drugs will come into play there as well. Okay, so risk factors. So risk factors are anything that can increase the chance of someone experimenting with alcohol or drugs. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone will definitely use alcohol or drugs. It just means that the more risk factors present, the more the risk increases. Okay, so it doesn't guarantee, yes, someone is going to try alcohol or drugs. It just means the risk is increased. So what increases the risk of my child experimenting with alcohol or drugs? So there's 4 influences: community, family, school, and the individual and peers. So particularly in the teenage years, the peers would have a massive influence. So community risk factors. So if there's social disorder in the community, if there's a lot of violence and, chaos in the community, it can increase the risk factor. If there's a low attachment to the neighbourhood, so if the neighbourhood you're in really there isn't a good community spirit in it, it can increase it. If there's easy access to alcohol or other drugs, so sometimes there'll be pockets of area where street drugs will be widely available, and then in other areas they won't be, So they're the community risk factors. The family risk factors. And this is the big one, and I suppose this is what everything has been really building up to the last couple of modules. It's about decreasing the risk factors in the family. So lack of or poor communication, lack of parental guidance, lack of or inconsistent rules and boundaries. The parent's attitude to alcohol or drugs is a massive risk factor. If there's a family history of addiction, so that means the risk goes up. Now, again, it doesn't mean that someone will definitely go on to abuse alcohol or drugs and become a dependent. It just means it increases the risk. There's a red flag up. And I suppose the big one I find is the parents' alcohol or attitude to alcohol and drugs. So I once wrote about a blog and I called it, sure, it's only drink, at least it's not drugs. So where we can kind of, make that difference between alcohol and drugs, where, that it's okay to drink, but drugs are dangerous. When in fact, I suppose in Ireland, that a lot of the harm in society will be alcohol-related harm rather than drug-related harm. But because alcohol is legal, we seem to think that that's okay. Okay. School risk factors. So, if there's poor academic achievements in the school and the school isn't very focused on that, if there's poor student support, if there's a lack of discipline or consequences in the school, and if there's unclear policies regarding alcohol or drugs. So, because drugs and alcohol are so widely spread now, every school really should have, a bullying policy, have a policy regarding alcohol or drugs. If someone is found in the school to be drunk or high, or to be dealing drugs, or to be carrying drugs, they need a policy around that. Individual and peer risk factors. So if, the child has rebellious behaviors, if you can see that there's a lot of risk taking going on, the peer and individual attitudes to alcohol or drugs. So if they're around with their friends and the friends are very, drug and alcohol orientated, it will influence them as well. It's a risk factor. If there's poor stress management skills, low achievements at school, if the young person isn't introduced to alcohol and drugs at a young age, again, it increases the risk of them going on to develop issues with alcohol or drugs. So the younger you start, the risk goes up. So protective factors, because there are protective factors, and these are the ones we need to build on, and these are the ones we need to focus on. So protective factors are anything that can reduce the chance of someone experimenting with alcohol or drugs. So I'll just read that again. Protective factors are anything that can reduce the chance of someone experimenting with alcohol or drugs. So it's reducing the risk. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean someone will definitely not use alcohol or drugs. It just means that the more protective factors present, the less the risk. So if I could ask you now, maybe to get a sheet of paper or a biro and just write down what protective factors that you are aware of in your community, in your school, in your home, in your society, and in your young person. And these are the ones you need to build on now. Okay. So what reduces the risk of my child experimenting with drugs? So again, we have the 4 influences again: community, family, school, and individual and peers. So community protective factors. So if there's social unity, if there's a sense of community, and a sense of, that everyone is united, it can reduce the risk. If there's caring adults in the community. So often you might find, that especially with young people, that they might talk to a different adult rather than their parents, and that's okay. That's okay too. Shared norms. So shared norms are behaviors and attitudes that are considered normal or typical within that group. And our ethnic and cultural identity. So some cultures are more inclined to drink than others. So for example, the Irish, we're well known for it. And other cultures aren't really, open to alcohol use, or don't drink at all, in fact. And it's really frowned on in their community. Okay, so the family protective factors. So again, parent-child communication, clear rules and boundaries, and consistent consequences. Shared fun time. So, the more you do together, it builds that bond, and a happy and stable home and family life as much as possible. That they're stable at home. It reduces the risk. So school. If there's a positive school climate, if there's clear rules and expectations, and there's clear policies around drug and alcohol and bullying and all that in the school, and they're enforced is the big thing as well, of course. And if the school is focused on academic accomplishments as well, that they're constantly supporting the students academically, it can reduce the risk as well. And individual and peer protective factors. So, high achievers are less likely to experiment. It will reduce the risk. If they're involved in extracurricular activities, so if they're involved in a sport, if the child has good problem solving skills and good critical thinking skills, communication skills, and if they kind of have an anti-drug and alcohol norm where they kind of realize, where their attitude towards it is, that's not something I want to be involved in, and you will find that young people do, so they kind of say, I'm not getting involved in that, so that reduces the risk. So, building on the positives, what are the risk or the protective factors you are aware of in your family and your community? So what have you identified after doing this that will reduce the risk of your child experimenting or getting into problems with alcohol and drugs? And write them down on a piece of paper so you remember them, and look at how you can nurture them. Okay, so that's it. So today's quote: the only rock I know that stays steady, the only institution I know that works, is the family. So I love that. So your child needs to know that the family unit is their rock, and that they can rely on the family unit, and that even if they do kind of maybe start experimenting, that you will support them and you will kind of help them through it, that they won't be abandoned. Okay, so that's it. So that's the 4th video. And in the next one, it's our final video, and we're going to look at what's out there in relation to drugs, and look at the different side effects. And I suppose it can be kind of scary when you look at it all in one presentation, but at least if you know what's out there, you can recognize maybe some of the signs and some of the symptoms. Okay, so that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you kind of recognize all the protective factors that are there, and how you can maybe nurture them, and how you can encourage your child to take part in anything that can build their confidence, and anything that can help them communicate with you or with another responsible adult. That's important to say that too, that there is someone that they can talk to if they don't feel they can talk to you. And all of those things will reduce the risk. Okay, so that's it for now. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'll see you on the final video.